Good morning, everyone. It's great to be with you all this morning. I see a lot of familiar names on the list of attendees this morning for our secure webinar, appropriately titled Addressing Parish Revenue at Year End. For those of you that I do not know, my name is Patrick Grace. I'm the Executive Director of the Catholic Community Foundation, so welcome to all of you for being with us today. I did see a few new faces, so that's encouraging. Also with us today are our friends and partners from CCS who will be joining us, or rather helping us present today's webinar as they have throughout the Secure program, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. Some of you may know Lauren Costello has been with us for a number of months, and Lauren will be the co-presenter along with myself this morning. And so what we'll do is I'm going to turn it over to Lauren to go over some of the logistics. And then Father Joe Previtt is going to begin with prayer. Father Joe is the pastor at Holy Rosary in Little Italy. I'll go over the agenda and we'll jump into it. So again, thanks everyone for being here, and I'll turn it over to Lauren to begin with some of the logistics.
Great. Thanks, Patrick. Good morning, everyone. So before we get started, I'd like to go over just a few housekeeping items so you know how to participate in today's session. We've taken a sample screenshot of the attendee interface, which you should see on your screen now, and you should see something like this with a control panel at the side of your computer screen. You may have joined the presentation using your computer's speaker system by default. That means if you can hear music through your computer, you should be able to hear the presentation. If you prefer to join over the telephone, please refer to the confirmation email you received with the dial-in number and the meeting ID. You'll have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenters by typing them into the box in your control panel. And you can send those questions in during the presentation, but we'll save some time at the end of today's presentation to answer your questions. Also, as a follow-up, you'll receive a recording and the slides from today's session via email in the coming days. So with that, I'm going to pass it back now over to Father Joe, who's going to lead our meeting with a prayer.
We begin in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Good and gracious God, on this day, we hear in your scriptures from Ecclesiastes that there's a time for everything. And during this most difficult time in our world, in our country, in our church, as we navigate the pandemic, we ask you to provide us with your guidance, your providence. And we also know that you are timeless, and may that always be in our hearts as well, that we know that you will lead and guide us always towards the eternal kingdom. And all we do this day, all we do for our parishes and our communities, may be directed toward bringing people closer to you. We ask this all through Christ our Lord. Amen. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Well, thanks, Father Joe. We appreciate you leading us in prayer appropriately with the Ecclesiastes reading for the day. Thank you so much. So the agenda for today, first we're going to start off with an audience poll, which we'll get to in a minute. We thought it would be helpful just to get a sense and take a temperature of where everyone is at, relevant specifically to their local offertory. Then we'll provide you a little bit of an update on Secure and give you a summary update of that activity. Number 4, you'll see there this kind of the state of philanthropy or fundraising right now. I thought this was kind of interesting about where perhaps many of us are, many of our parishes and other nonprofit organizations are currently. This was something I saw a couple of weeks ago, and I thought I would share this with you, and we'll get into that. Lauren will talk about some strategic approaches to fundraising as we look to the fourth quarter. We'll go over kind of a fundraising checklist, kind of a to-do for year-end as we look at the fourth quarter. Then we'll talk a little bit about some of the additional resources that the foundation has and will be providing parishes as we continue to work through this, as Father Joe mentioned, this difficult time. And then, of course, last but not least, we'll end with some time for Q&A. So that's kind of the agenda for the hour or so that we have everyone here this morning. But let's start with this audience poll. And if I could throw the question up, if you will. And I think it's an appropriate one. I think that all of us can relate to, and all of our parishes, I should say. And first and foremost, how has your offertory been for the last couple of months? So if you would take a moment to answer this, we'll get a sense of the panelists, or rather the attendees, of where you're at. Give it about 10 or 15 seconds, and we'll come back with the results. Okay, so there we go. So you can see of those represented today, 9% have increased. Not surprisingly, there's a higher percentage that have decreased than increased, and quite a few that are remaining steady, which it's not a surprise in this sense. I think the fact that so many are decreasing is probably one of the reasons why we're here today, although I think it's something that we're realizing our support of parishes is first and foremost needs to be a high priority, and so we're grateful for the opportunity to share today's presentation. But this is interesting. I appreciate your giving us a sense of where you're at. Next question. This kind of will help us lead into today's presentation. Do you have a plan for the final quarter of the year to address parish revenue or offertory needs? Again, we'll give you 10 or 15 seconds to respond. So I'm not surprised that none of you do, interestingly, because this is something that many parishes haven't had to deal with, quite honestly, in the past. I don't think many parishes I don't think anybody would have thought we would be in this position 12 months ago. And so it's not surprising that so few of you rather, have felt the need or had the need to actually strategically look at how you would address your offertory or revenue needs. Unfortunately, that is where we are today. That's the reality. That's the bad news. The good news is I think we're here to help, and hopefully through sessions like today and other follow-up support that we can provide, hopefully we're here to help provide a resource to you. So it's good to get a perspective of where you're all at today. So thanks for doing that audience poll. So just to give you an update on the Secure program, we started this back in April, as many, if not all of you may recall. We really initiated it as a response to the current environment, the current pandemic. It appropriately stands for, as you can read there, the support, evaluation, connect, and utilize, and last but not least, engage your parish community. And you can see the reading there. That really it gets at the heart of what we're trying to do through this program. We do believe it's an ongoing initiative. It's not just meant to have happened earlier when we started it in April with 85 or so parishes. We think it needs to be there ongoing to provide as much resource and support, as I mentioned, as possible. We did 5 webinars earlier this spring and summer. And the next item there you'll see is we get a lot of questions, parishes asking us, so how am I doing? How is my offertory compared to other offertories throughout the diocese? I get a lot of questions from pastors or business managers. What we have in front of you there is where we were collectively or aggregate in the diocese at the end of June. And you can see there that the forecast would predict or basically provide around 96 to 97% of offertory was captured through the end of the fiscal year. So if you're wondering from a benchmarking perspective where you might land or where you might fall, this gives you a sense of how your peers are doing. Again, this is in the aggregate. We know some parishes have experienced much more significant declines. Some of you perhaps have experienced more of an increase. But this just gives you a sense of where other parishes are in the aggregate across the 185 parishes in the diocese. Regardless of where you are, as was just evidenced by the audience poll, we felt very strongly that it would be in all of our best interests or your best interest collectively that maybe we should be considering a time to develop a year-end strategy. And that really is why we are here today to provide you this webinar. So with that kind of some of the backdrop, let me show the next screen with you, which I was attending a webinar a couple weeks ago, and I saw this diagram, which I thought was very interesting and appropriate. It was given by a guy by the name of Nick Pringer, who found this graph related to fundraising in a crisis and how it relates to parishes and Catholic fundraising. And what you can see there, and what this research, if you will, experience based on a couple of different crises is indicated, and that is if you start back to March or April when the pandemic first started, perhaps your parish might have received, maybe it was around Easter, somewhat of a bump, mid-March to Easter timeframe. people, after the initial shock that it may have gone down, there was an immediate bump in your offertory or revenue, which was encouraging. That may have stayed with you through the early months, but my guess is many of you during the summer months, and I think that 36% that were experiencing a decrease may be experiencing the slump, if you will, which is phase 2 of where perhaps many of our parishes are. And that occurred over the last several months. The key then is if you look to phase 3, which is the surge. And this is the piece that relates to year-end giving opportunities. And I think if you follow this trend line, if it's accurate, this would provide an opportunity to all of our parishes and truth to all nonprofits, that there is an opportunity for your parish and for our schools and other nonprofits to advantage giving opportunities as we look to the fourth quarter. The question is, what will the new normal look like? I think that's something that not all of us, or any of us, are certain what it will look like in 2021. So that's a question mark. I'm not sure we're at the new normal. But maybe some of you experienced the bump, the slump, and perhaps are looking forward to the surge. And what we wanted to do today is give you tools and resources and examples of how parishes are preparing themselves to take advantage of that surge. The last thing I would say about this slide, which I think is an important takeaway, and that is the dotted line at the bottom that shows and is representative of organizations or parishes that are not doing anything at all related to communications or actively communicating and engaging their parishes. So this is almost as telling as the line up above, because if you're not doing anything, the likely scenario that you will fall behind, both philanthropically, giving, or otherwise, is far, far more likely in this scenario. So you do not want to be on that dotted line, obviously. So again, we thought this would be a good summary to share with you in that context. Also, if you look to year-end giving, a couple of facts to keep in mind. And this is also something that perhaps none of you have seen before, and that is that nearly 1/3 of total annual giving occurs in December. A lot of people make gifts at year-end. Perhaps it's for tax purposes. Perhaps it's because they're feeling generous because of the holidays. Perhaps organizations are reaching out asking them for. But interestingly, even within the context of year-end giving, the last 3 days of the month, and this would be a vote for if you're thinking about sending out an email at the last couple of days of the year, 12% of all giving during the month of December occurs during the last 3 days of the year, which again, I thought would be relevant and important, perhaps of interest to share with you. Nearly 54% of all nonprofits start planning their year-end appeal in October. I think that is probably true for nonprofits, but not so much as true for many parishes. So my guess is most of our parishes, as was evidenced before in the audience poll, most of you weren't thinking and aren't thinking about how to address your offertory revenue needs at year-end, because you haven't had to in the past, quite honestly. So you're not alone, but the idea here is to start giving you some ideas to think about that. So I want to turn over to Lauren now to talk about some strategies around the next couple of months and kind of take us through some practical tips and examples from other parishes.
Sounds great. Yeah, so with those 3 facts in mind, I mean, the year-end giving time, this time starting in October, is extremely important for all of us. And going back to that chart that Patrick highlighted, we want to take advantage of that surge opportunity. So approaching year-end fundraising strategically is how we're going to frame the next few examples and highlights that we've noticed or picked up along the way in our conversations with parishes across our own diocese. But there's some 6 best practices. None of these are, I think, on their own too groundbreaking, I would say, but taken together can really make a greater impact on your year-end fundraising strategy. So first and foremost, thanking donors for their gifts, always, in any way that you can that makes it personal and individualized. We'll share some examples about that. Building relationships with donors through engagement opportunities that don't necessarily have to directly tie to soliciting them for a gift. And we'll share an example of that from a parish in our own diocese. Dedicating personnel time and resources to fundraising. So just making sure that from today through the end of the year, I know that so many of our parishes have competing priorities and focuses right now. I know that it's really hard to prioritize these types of activities, but dedicating serious time, both on your personnel, your parish staff, and yourself to these activities is going to be critically important to being successful. And then, don't discredit the mail communication, provided you are making sure that it's a personal communication. So, eliminating the Dear Parishioner letter and saying Dear Mr. and Mrs. In addition to electronic messages. I think we've all gotten very comfortable over the last few months, or maybe we haven't gotten comfortable, but out of necessity, we've started to use electronic messages. But sending the mail message or even a handwritten letter, I think still holds true, especially towards the end of the year. Offering planned giving opportunities, and that can be as simple as having some language on your parish website, and we'll share a couple examples of that as well. And then building relationships with grant-making foundations and corporate donors. So in addition to the focus that we all place on our parishioners and our individual donors, spending some time thanking past sponsors, thanking foundations and other corporate donors, that's an important piece of this process as well. And that sort of builds off one of our earlier webinars where we were talking about events and parish fundraising in a virtual context. This best practice is kind of a holdover from that previous theme and webinar as well. So why don't we dig into some examples based on these 6 best practices. So right off the bat, when you think about thanking donors for their gifts, the first pastor that comes to mind, the first parish, is Father Ron Wersch, who actually may be joining us today on the webinar. Father Ron has been, we've connected with him over the past few months, and he's shared a number of examples where he really takes the time to not only offer a very in-depth overview of how his parishioners' giving activity has changed over the previous year, but he uses it as an opportunity to thank them as well. So a couple things that I want to highlight about this example. Father Ron in particular offered a giving statement to his parishioners for year to date at the time he was sending this out in September. So it's dated up to August 31st. And it not only highlighted how individual parishioners have given, but he gave a high-level overview of how the parish was doing more broadly, more generally. And I remember having a conversation with Father where he articulated the value of saying how the parish is doing broadly relative to parishioners' individual giving, meant that parishioners could ask themselves how they were doing relative to the broader parish. So they could ask themselves their own questions of, can I pick up my own giving? Am I ahead of the average? Can I give a little bit more towards year end? I think it's just a great way to just offer transparent information, but remaining very grateful and using language that ensures folks are thanked in a meaningful and personal way. So this was just a great example that we wanted to highlight. I mentioned building relationships through engagement opportunities need not be solicitation focused. So Father Steve Bronowski at St. Hilary Parish does this, I believe, on an annual basis, if I'm not mistaken. But this came as an accompaniment to a stewardship guide, which basically offered every opportunity for a parishioner to be engaged spiritually and in the ministries of St. Hilary Parish over the course of the year. And this was a brochure that parishioners can fill out to highlight where they hope to support the parish over the coming year. And it's not only financially focused, it's a gift of time, a gift of treasure, and then a question of how we can serve you. So it's a little bit, there's like some reciprocity here in the way that this is framed. And I think this, alongside a written letter, a really beautiful letter that Father wrote to go along with the stewardship guide, was just a great way to have parishioners ask themselves how they want to be engaged with the parish over the coming year. And I think that gives way to a conversation about support a little bit more easily than just a cut and dry solicitation letter. But everything from the design, it's like really straightforward to follow here, to the kind of comprehensive view, I think is a really strong example. This is a great example of dedicating some additional time and resources to fundraising. So Cathedral of St. John the Evangelist, Father Sean Ralph, this was way back, I mean, just a couple months ago. This was back in July when we were all focused on offertory recovery. And I know a number of parishes are still trying to focus on making up an offertory deficit that we may have experienced as a result of COVID-19. So this was a really simple task, but it did take some time to execute, where Father sent out a wonderful letter and addressed the offertory needs of the cathedral and requested support from his parishioners. The important note here is that he included 3 offertory recovery envelopes. So one for September, one for August, and one for July. And in terms of results, so this really did result in some serious offertory recovery for Father and the cathedral. From 216 gifts, they raised just over $42,000. And I think one of the most important points here is that 62 donors gave multiple gifts over this 3-month period. So something just as simple as sending out an offertory recovery envelope and making it as easy as possible for a parishioner to support your parish. It's a simple step. It does take some time and resources on your part to get it out. But as a result of, just getting it out there, the results speak for themselves. I mean, that's a really great result from sending out some envelopes. Regularly communicate through mail and electronic. I have a couple examples here that I want to highlight. Father Matthews at Our Lady of Victory Parish sent out this wonderful survey, again, that wasn't focused on support to the parish. It wasn't talking about offertory recovery, and it wasn't making a request, but it did ask about the parishioner's spiritual needs. So you can see a couple example questions here of: have parishioners returned to Mass? Are they comfortable? What are their concerns? I know Father Draga at Resurrection Chapel also sent this out when the parishes were just starting to reopen in May, I believe. And this was included with a written letter from the pastor to parishioners, providing updates and giving a little overview of the financial needs, but the focus was really in communicating through a survey with parishioners about where they stand now. And if you haven't done something like that yet, I would consider something like that form of engagement. Another example would be Father Kevin Elbert at St. Luke the Evangelist Parish. So this was an opportunity where Father had sent out a survey to have this. Sounds like my personal nightmare. I would be so anxious to receive a survey like this, but Deacon Jim was required to preach on a regular basis, and parishioners were invited to offer feedback, which I think could ultimately be a really positive experience. But it's a communication without a financial need, but a form of engagement for folks to feel connected to their parish, connected to Deacon Jim, and just be part of the process. And I think this is a really great example. They also, I believe, recorded his homily and posted it on YouTube, which is a nice electronic communication example as well. Perfect. So we're getting towards the end of these 6 best practices here, but one simple step that you can take is to offer planned gift opportunities on your website. So making it as easy as, and we have all of this language. If you don't have this on your parish website yet, we're happy to provide some stock language for you to consider. And we might suggest something like having a ways to give tab on your parish website if you don't have that yet. And listed under those ways to give, highlight a legacy giving function. So in this case, with St. Mary Parish in Painesville, Father Steve Valanga has a really great overview of ways to give to the parish in a separate tab for legacy giving. Father Valanga actually, as a result of having this information out there, received a planned gift, pretty sizable one, and was able to communicate that back out to his parish, not only as good news, but as an opportunity to communicate, this is one way you can consider supporting your parish through a planned gift. And it really doesn't take too much effort on your part. It's really all about having that information available, perhaps offering a reminder through a bulletin in addition to your website or through a newsletter, particularly as you're getting to the year-end giving. This is one aspect that's pretty simple to plug into your strategy. So the last point here, we highlighted in our events and fundraisers webinar, St. Gabriel Parish's walkathon, because it was a really great example of an event taken place in person. It still took place outdoors, but it had pivoted to a virtual, in this case, a video where it sort of collated everyone's activities and fundraising in support of this annual walkathon. One thing that they did really well was thank their sponsors at the outset of the video after Father introduced the walkathon and what they were doing that day. And I think it's just a reminder to us. So, inevitably early in 2021, there probably will be parish events and fundraisers that will have to remain virtual. And I think as long as we remain cognizant of the fact that those sponsors don't have to go with your in-person event, they can still be a part of and a major supporter to your fundraisers, provided you're thanking them in a meaningful way. And this was a great way to do it, while still sort of maintaining the spirit of the event. And ultimately, they were very successful.
Hey, Lauren, I'm going to offer a bonus number 7 best practice or strategic idea. This is actually an example from St. Francis Xavier in Medina. They have a donor who's given them, I think the last 2 years in a row, it's an anonymous donor who's made a $15,000 gift to the parish in December. And the donor has asked that gift be used as a matching gift so that they would match dollar for dollar up to $15,000 only during the month of December. And I think it was specifically in this case for the school. So it was a $15,000 gift. It had to be used for the school. And I share that as an example because matching gifts, you have it there. It's actually the last item here in this fourth quarter item, but I wanted to share it now from a best practice example, because I think a lot of our parishes do receive some very generous singular gifts at year end. And if you think your parish might be receiving that, or you know of someone who might be considering it, you could ask that individual if they would mind using it as a challenge gift to invite and inspire other generosity during the remainder of the year. So if you have someone or could identify a prospective donor that would be used in that matching gift way, again, that's a great idea to share as a matching gift donor for your parish.
That's great. Thank you, Patrick. So let's chat about some activities to keep in mind from now until the end of the year. And these are really these are not, certainly don't consider this as a checklist. Consider them as suggestions that perhaps could take place sometime over the next 3 months, and only if they fit into your broader parish strategy, but they're for your consideration. And so if you're thinking about October, going back to that earlier slide where so many nonprofits start their year-end planning in the month of October, maybe this is a good time to boost up your engagement. So through something like a parish census like Father Matus, or distributing a survey like Father Elbert. We're doing this right now pretty often with parishes in conducting a communications audit. So early on in the secure webinars, we spent a lot of time talking about, stretching your comfort level a little bit, developing some new communication channels so that you can connect with your parishioners in a more virtual space. I think it's a great time now to reflect back on what worked well, what remains, and what's going to serve us well in 2021. So communicate, it doesn't need to be a formal process, but just asking yourself, have we done enough to be able to communicate with our parishioners in the right way? And alongside that, if you don't have an online giving function, so if you're not currently working with an online giving vendor, it's one of the easiest things to set up, provided you find a vendor that works for you. There's also the universal offertory giving page that's available through the diocese. But I would definitely encourage you to consider some online giving function as a part of that communications audit. So things like drafting a stewardship report, so getting a good handle on where the parish ended at the end of the fiscal year or calendar year, so that you can communicate out to your parishioners where we stand as a parish, and perhaps starting to think about things like segmenting your donor list based on your offertory numbers, or as Patrick mentioned, challenging your top donors to set a matching challenge for year end, so that you can motivate your parishioners to give in a different way. And if there's a deficit in your budget for the year, close that deficit. So for November, obviously still thinking about segmenting thank you lists. The value of segmenting is not to exclude anyone from any type of communication. It's really to make sure that your most generous parishioners are thanked in a meaningful, personal way. So segmenting could mean anything from dividing up the type of letter that's received based on a kind of tiered process of how folks are giving to your parish, or how the total giving amount to the parish. Or it could just mean, placing a phone call to the top 10% most generous parishioners and making sure that they get a call from your pastor to just say a personal thank you, or signing the letter. It can mean any number of those things, but making sure that you're giving a little extra nod to those who have been particularly generous to you. Starting to think about holiday mass times, sending those out, perhaps along with a parish survey. Think about social media posts. It's like, as we're getting towards the end of the year, it might be a good time to remind folks about, as I said, mass times, ways to give. If you're conducting a survey, sharing out the results. And of course, remaining mindful of COVID-19 restrictions and how to stay safe during the holiday season. During December, considering an Advent-focused mailing to promote year-end giving and including planned gift language is a great opportunity to close out the year, to say thank you for year-end gifts. I mentioned that, calling top 10% most generous parishioners for a personal thank you. One thing that perhaps makes a pastor's life a bit simpler is, pastors are not solely responsible for making those phone calls. You can task your parish or your finance council to reach out. And early on, I think we made the recommendation, or we were hearing from parishes who had their parish or finance council reaching out to just conduct wellness checks for folks. And if you haven't done that in a while, since, maybe May, when you were opening back up, or when at the height of the pandemic in March, now at the end of the year, it's a great time to just check in and say hello, see how folks are doing. Always, don't discredit the InPew handout and bulletin highlighting ways to give, letting folks know how easy it is to either sign up for online giving or drop off an envelope at the parish. And 2020 has been one big year, let's say, so offering some reflections for the year through your social media, or maybe a video. I know so many pastors are posting videos on their social media, which are always really great ways to engage with your parishioners. Those types of reflections are a great thing to do in December. In addition to the timeline, I think I'll hand it back over to Patrick to talk for a few minutes about some other opportunities in addition to what we outlined here to consider over the coming months as we round out the year.
Sounds good. Thanks, Lauren. Just one additional comment that I think most of our parishes are fully in tune with, but just a reminder, embedded in all of these communication strategies is keeping in mind the importance of those folks that are still with you live streaming or in one way, shape, or another connecting with you virtually. That is an incredibly important constituency, as you all know, and taking time to connect with them individually with communications, calls, et cetera, that constituency is often a very generous member of your parish, or they can be. I think you all know that, so again, we're preaching to the choir. But that extra attention that you spend with them, spiritually first and foremost, I might add, but also related to their own treasure and certainly time of prayer and time of financial commitment to the parish is important as well. So I certainly would share that as well. The last slide here that would, before we kick it over to questions and answers, if anybody has, it's just an overview of additional resources and opportunities, revenue opportunities that we would bring your attention to. First and foremost is We Give Catholic. We had 3 webinars this week. Perhaps some of you attended one of them or several of them to prepare for We Give Catholic, which is on December 1st. We have, I think, 235 representative parishes, Catholic schools, other Catholic ministries participating in We Give Catholic. This week's webinars were all focused on training, educating, informing, and resourcing the appropriate leaders to carry forth this initiative. Last year, for those of you that were not aware of this, that initiative raised about $1.8 million through the course of that 24-hour event. So if you're not involved with that, give me a call or give one of us at the foundation a call afterwards. We'd be happy to chat with you further. It's a great opportunity for a parish or school or to get more involved and another opportunity for generating revenue. Increased offertory programs. I think some of you, perhaps not all of you, were aware that the diocese has a one-time offer where it would pay for an incentive, if you will, to pay for your parish to do an offertory enhancement or increased offertory program in either 2019 or 2020. That has been extended to 2021. So if you're a parish that has not advantaged or taken advantage of that initiative, give us a call. That is something you might want to consider in 2021 as you look to your different revenue opportunities in the new year. The third item there is certainly something that we'll continue to be communicating with all of our parishes on, and that is the Heart of the Shepherd campaign, which hit the pause button earlier this spring when the pandemic arrived. But we are now working with 15 parishes this fall in a pilot phase 2 initiative. The key takeaway for all of you would be that the campaign is being reintroduced with a parish share component, whereby a parish would retain either 50 cents of every dollar or 65 cents of every dollar raised by the parish. That did not exist prior to the pandemic. So that is something that will be coming to all of our parishes in 2021. And so that's another opportunity for parishes to address local needs, whether it be a lost revenue opportunity or perhaps a project that was on the horizon that you had to shelf because of the pandemic. So stay tuned for information on that. The Universal Offertory Program, this is for parishes that perhaps are not electronically savvy or electronically offering opportunities to their parishioners to give online to support their offertory. This opportunity remains on our website, so a parishioner can give to your parish via our website. It goes once a month to the parish. We send exchange checks to the parishes. So again, if you're not promoting electronic giving opportunities, this is another source of support for those that might need it. And then, of course, is the ongoing support via Secure. So you can continue to look for best practices that will come through Secure, through our office, through the foundation, of course. As we get best practices, we want to continue to forward them to you, to share with one another. We would encourage you to share ideas with us where you have success. We like to hear about them so that we can be unified in our sharing with one another. So we would certainly share that with you as well, and we'll continue that through the Secure program. And I think with that, we will end and see if anybody has questions for either Lauren or myself. I'd be happy to answer them now. I don't know if any came through, Lauren, to you or otherwise. I do have one question that was asked here, but I'll give it a pause, Lauren. If you have any that have come to you that have been asked, I'll wait for that. Oh, I do have one question that's already been posed to me.
Why don't you put forward that question, Patrick?
So I have a question from a parish that's wondering what a parish should be doing, or actually they're specifically asking, they're a Faith Direct customer. So we have over, I think it's 45 or 50 of our parishes use Faith Direct to do their electronic or online giving, electronic giving. And their question is, are we aware if Faith Direct has any year-end publicity, collateral communication materials that would help encourage year-end giving, et cetera, electronically, I guess is the way they're asking this. That's a great question, and I would answer it this way, and it wouldn't just be for those of you that have Faith Direct as a vendor. I would encourage you all to connect with your representative vendor who's helping you. So whether it's OSV, Faith Direct, LPI, Church Budget, I'm probably missing several other vendors, but I would encourage you to reach out to them. They often provide year-end giving opportunities like brochures and different things, items, if you will, that can help promote year-end giving. Sometimes they'll offer it as part of their service. It's not through no additional charge. Other times they'll offer it to existing clients at a different or a discounted rate or something to that effect. But I would encourage you to reach out to whether it is Faith Direct or OSV. There might be some opportunities that you can piggyback onto some existing services they provide, and as a customer, why would you not advantage that? Earlier, I think this summer we mentioned that Church Budget was offering a one-time letter that they would send for free. I know a handful of parishes took advantage of that. So if you were a Church Budget customer, you might want to pursue that. But that's leveraging vendor relationships. I know we talked about it earlier this summer. That is an important aspect that I think all of you should consider. Other questions?
Patrick, we have
Lauren,
Yep, we have someone wondering if you could offer a little bit more about how We Give Catholic works for parishes.
Yeah, so We Give Catholic, you could register now, and it's not too late, first and foremost. So if you're there and you haven't registered, give me a call afterwards. But basically, it's a 24-hour online giving event where, in this case, a local parish would promote, encourage, invite people to go online and support your individual parish. The value of We Give Catholic is you're actually doing it on actually Giving Tuesday. It's December 1st, Tuesday, December 1st, and you're actually going to be participating with, as I mentioned before, 234 other parishes, schools, and Catholic ministries, and it basically becomes a unified fundraising event online, if you will, that happens. We actually promote it significantly through media. We actually have a partner within a number of different ways that we send out messaging related to this opportunity. A lot of parishes and schools have used it to increase giving by a particular project. So parishes will choose a particular area of need that's maybe $5,000 or $10,000, whatever the case might be, and they just encourage parishioners to go online during that 24-hour event to give. I would also add there are over $60,000 plus in prizes that are incentives, awards, if you will, to participating organizations. So just by signing up, you're eligible to win a $500 award or a prize, if you will. So it doesn't cost you anything to be involved. And again, we have random drawings that parishes or schools or ministries can realize as much as $500 just by participating. But we can explain a lot more of that to you if you want to call me offline. I'd be happy to share more information about it.
Great. Thanks, Patrick.
Is that all we have, Lauren?
Yeah, I'm just checking the chat function. If folks have any other additional questions, you certainly can see our contact information up here, and we'll be following up with everyone, as I mentioned, after this webinar with the materials, and we're pretty easy to find if you have any additional thoughts.
Yep, sounds good. Yeah, please don't hesitate to call us. We're here to be a resource for you. We're here to support you and provide as much information as we can. We realize this is a tough time for everyone, and anything we can do to help you through it, we're glad to do it. All right, thanks everyone. Have a great afternoon. Enjoy the weekend. Bye now.